now I'd like to introduce our second presenter. So it's Stuart Needleman, Chief Commercial Officer for Piramal Pharma Solutions. As Chief Commercial Officer, Stuart is responsible for driving all global business development activities for the services business, ranging from discovery service to commercial supply in both drug substance and drug products. Stu plays a key role in enabling successful growth and execution of all Piramal Pharma Solutions offering. Stu is a respected senior executive in the contract service industry, having held leadership roles in global business development, sales, marketing, and operations, and is a distinguished career that spans nearly 3 decades. His track record of driving sustainable growth at attractive margins across several leading global organizations is well acknowledged by the industry. He also has proven experience in developing seamless solutions that integrate drug substance and drug products. Stu also functions as Chief Patient-centric Officer for Piramal Pharma Solutions, and in his role, he is responsible for ensuring that everyone at the company understands their role in helping to reduce the burden of disease and remains focused on the needs of patients. So with this, I would like to hand the session over to you, Stu.
Thank you very much, Diana, and good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever people are in the world. And that was quite an introduction. I don't think I wrote that one, but you did some homework on that. So thank you very much for that nice introduction. I think today, leading off of what Molly talked about, we'll continue to talk a little bit about small molecule API manufacturing trends. For people who know me, and I've been around, as Diana said, for about 40 years in this space, one of the key things I've heard for the last 20 years when we would attend conferences or we would go to trade shows or other reports was that biologics were coming and you better get into that, jump into the water, and if you're going to be a CDMO, you better have a biologics play because that's the future. The data really doesn't support that per se. It's not to say that biologics aren't important, and their growth is certainly there, but small molecules still are going to be big. They remain the main driver. If you look at the last 4 years, and Molly had a little bit of this, you can see the number of new molecular entities that have been approved all the way going into 2020, where 53 new molecular entities were approved, and 36 of those were small molecules. So you can just see that you need to be focused on the API manufacturing being positioned to still drive growth and still supply patients with drug. It's still the most outsourced area. It's the most mature area in the marketplace of outsourcing has been small molecule manufacturing. And again, some of those key drivers for why this is still true, Molly talked about. You have niche segments, high potent API, robust oncology pipeline, all of big pharma, biotechs are all chasing around oncology. You also have some players with differentiated capabilities, but it isn't as widespread. So you nearly need to be able to handle certain things. Lots of companies can handle certain OELs or certain safe bridge categories, but to go below 1 nanogram per meter cubed, as an example, you don't have that many players. So the pool gets smaller. You continue to see, again, drugs are being approved, small molecules by the FDA. So that's something that's really important to make sure that your companies are investing in it, the CDMOs are investing in that arena. We've invested as on Molly's, I didn't have her create that slide, but we've added, significant capacity and capabilities in 2 of our North American sites over the last 12 months, and we'll continue. And we're investing in a lot of our other sites just to meet up with customer demand and customer pull. And I'm sure that's the same as some of the other companies that Molly talked about on her slide previously, whether you're Cambrex or Corden, et cetera. I think another trend, and this was something that we saw about 15 years ago, but the market wasn't ready. Maybe it wasn't mature. Maybe there was still inside big pharma not invented here syndrome, and they didn't want to do certain things differently, and you needed change. And if you really pay attention to what's gone on inside Big Pharma over the last 10 years, there's been significant CEO change. The average CEO of a big pharma company is typically 4 to 5 years. But if you go back and look at some of these companies, whether you're Sanofi or GSK, and we can go on down the list, there's been significant change at the leadership level, which drives change down. But change takes time. So API manufacturing has now become part of an integrated services program where you have global networks where you can do multiple things for customers. This allows the pharma company, whether you're a big pharma or biotech, to do more with less, managing quality agreements, just getting better pricing even, capacity reservations, different deal structures and business models. So it really has changed the way things have been done, and we continue to see that change will continue in an evolution. There are certain companies that are moved into that arena that were only one service. There are certain companies that are looking at it differently, and how they continue to get a bigger piece of the outsourcing pie. So we see how it can improve speed to market. It definitely decreases complexity for customers. If you're a biotech company with 2 people, whether you're 2 men in a molecule, all the way to a small biotech with 100 people, you need these services because you're in a race. You're either a race to your next milestone, or you're in a race to get to a launch, or a race to get to data to do a deal with another pharmaceutical company. So speed to market is really critical. This way, today, the single project management, the single spans of control, and right now we've seen the shift where 75% or so of all the integrated projects at our company have an API component to it. And that's a dramatic change over the last, I'm going to say, 5 years. You also are looking at supply chain security. So starting materials being made at other facilities. Piramal has an ability to have an east-west view of the world, as we have 6 sites in the U.S. and 6 sites in India, so east and west. So we're able to give geographic proximity as well as supply chain security, which I think is the new fundamental change that's going to happen. And I'll talk a little bit about that with the impact of COVID. One of the things that might be a little controversial, and Molly talked a little about it, is this word onshoring or reshoring. Over the last 12 months and even prior to that, with some of the political environment around the globe, there was some talk about, a lot of domestic pride and bring things back to certain countries in certain areas. Whether that could be done is certainly questionable at best, especially with some of the slides that Molly showed, or with the major investments and manufacturing hubs, whether you're in Italy, where the generic industry really started, so to speak, and the move into India and China. So we don't see that you could actually reshore everything to domestic countries, your national country of origin. But we have seen some companies looking to diversify their supply chain. I think choosing a CDMO with a global footprint minimizes risks. Again, this local global concept. But you have to also have the other key attributes: quality, reliability, and a track record to ensure continuity of supply. One of the first things that you need to talk about in the go forth is sustainability, your environmental health and safety issues, your quality track record, your approval record, things of that nature. Those are very, very critical. The other part of onshoring that we have seen around COVID, which is, crisis management from the government and getting vaccines to people's arms, et cetera. You have seen governments, immobilize, for example, Operation Warp Speed, the Defense Production Act, et cetera. So we have seen some things coming back, and clearly you have to have some capacity to meet the needs of the government and the demands of again, everything we do every single day is around the patient. But at the same time, you have other drugs because cancer is still here, other diabetes is still here, other diseases still need to be cured, the patient discovered, so the patients can get treatments. So that means you have to have capacity available for the entire spectrum of the pharmaceutical market. So we don't see reshoring as the be-all and end-all. We see some companies doing it. We see some biotech companies talking about it. We also need to talk about the issues. There have been issues around IP in certain countries, so that's always going to be there. But we also see that it's not feasible to just reshore everything. So you have to have a balanced portfolio. COVID changed the way we do business. Even like, for example, this webinar changed the way we do business. But COVID changed our channels for how to go out and sell. How do you find new customers in the world when you can't knock on doors? How do you deal with your existing customer base? How do you deal with drugs that have been repurposed, being looking for as a therapeutic? So we've seen different ways in adoption of virtual channels. Everybody's working on Zoom or Teams or other things, and I think it's worked really well short term. And I think as we come out of this global pandemic over the course of this year, hopefully. I don't think we'll ever go back to the way it was, but I think we'll still rely on some of these tools going forward. But at the same time, COVID has had people look at de-risking their supply chain, making sure they had multiple sources of supply. We actually make an oncology API, and we actually now make it in a second site inside Piramal. So we've de-risked that customer and minimize the tech transfer. But backward integration, dual and multiple sourcing, those things are here to come. There were opportunities for development and manufacturing of COVID-19 drugs that are being repurposed, new therapeutics, et cetera, as I talked about. If people on this webinar have the ability to get to American Chemical Society and C&E News, and I'm not pushing them, nor am I a paid spokesperson, but there was a whole section on COVID-19 this past week, which is a really powerful issue around what's going on in the marketplace around repositioning, repurposing certain drugs. Is it the right thing to do? The impact of capacity, et cetera. So I would encourage people to look at this. But I think repurposing is something that's going to continue. The other piece of this is we have seen that there's been delays in clinical trials. Enrollment. Everything was focused on COVID. So certain decisions were delayed. When those decisions start to come back, when people need to get into the clinic, we're going to see a surge of demand and a lack of capacity. So, how do you communicate with your customer base to make sure they're planning in advance, to make sure they have their API not being the rate limiting step, or as we used to say, CMC not being rate limited. I'm sure everybody here is doing virtual audits, et cetera. And I think this is here to stay, again, until we're fully through it, the pandemic. The last piece of this is something that's a little bit unique from a CDMO perspective that I just want to touch on. And I actually talked about this 2 years ago. Well, the last time we were at CPHI in Europe together as a group of professionals in the pharma sector, we moved to becoming a patient-centric organization. Everything we do is at the the focus of our customer. Our customer is critical to us. But at the end of the day, our patient is who pays us. Now, whether that sounds kind of weird because we don't, they're not our drugs. They're, we're an outsourcing provider. So it's Glaxo's drug or Roche's drug or whoever you want to call its molecule. But at the end of the day, our job is to make sure we get that molecule at the right time and the right spec to the right place so a patient can actually take that medicine. So we recognize inside Piramal that the ultimate beneficiary of the work we do is the patient. And we've organized around this concept to address the needs. It's a foundation, it's a core philosophy. It drives everything we do in our operations to assure that we're aligned to meet the needs of our customers and patients. Yes, it's an emotional pull. No, it's not a marketing slogan. It's how we believe, it's how we eat, how we sleep, and why we come to work every day. We have examples. We had an example where we're making a cancer medicine that was approved in Japan, and one of our finance lead in a site in America, basically next door neighbor, was actually taking that drug in a clinical trial that that lengthened their life. Those are the motivating stories and great stories that we do every single day and how we touch patients. So we've created patient awareness councils at every site. These are things to motivate, to change, to create awareness, to promote results, to stress the importance of meeting customer expectations, and would display a commitment and making a difference in patients' lives. So these are things, and it's one of the reasons why I stay engaged in this marketplace and come to work every day. So if you have the pleasure of talking with us or of working with Piramal, I hope you see that this is a kind of part of our DNA. And realistically, it's part of the DNA should be the DNA of the entire CDMO and pharma industry.